All right, we are live on YouTube
Ah,
tonight.
great.
So, what was the topic that you wanted to discuss, Robinson? Because I thought since this was going to be a shorter episode of the Sober Happy Hour, that we would potentially have a conversation about. Um, we did our conversation a couple of weeks ago on a particular drug, so I thought it would be cool to do this episode a conversation about another drug. But if you had an idea, I'm all ears.
Well, I don't have any specific details or I haven't done any research, but I was thinking about um, doing an episode on what kind of influence the music and movie industry has on drug use, drug abuse, glorifying it,
I love it.
and
I love it, and I love it, and I'll tell you why, because it actually does tie in to my topic that I wanted to talk about as well, which is the topic of heroin and opioids and prescription painkillers. And I think that tends to be that, and maybe marijuana are the two most prevalent illicit drugs in media and popular culture.
I think drug experimenting and abuse begins for most people
Mm-hmm.
in like college peer pressure areas.
Well,
Everyone's
sure.
partying and everyone's encouraged to do another shot. They hear hazing has a lot of drug abuse in it, and
I guess I'm not sure what one has to do with the other. Are we going to talk about that, or are we going to talk about media?
well, the reason I brought that up is because we have a lot of films that are made by um, uh, what's that dude's name? Um, just the college films, the films where people are like always getting stoned. College student films. Not not doc. Well, let me think. What's that?
I think I know what you're talking
Seth
about.
Rogen. Seth Rogen.
Yeah, and
A
and
lot of his
before
films
and
are
before
gruesome.
him was all the American Pie films and stuff. So let's start the show, and then we can have this discussion while we're recording.
Oh, well, that's right. We haven't done the bumper music yet. Sorry.
All right,
Okay.
cool. We will be started here. 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. I am your host. We are coming to you live on youtube.com and streaming all over the internet via podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast catcher. I personally like a podcast application called Overcast, but that's just me. You can choose whichever one you like. I am here with my good friend Robinson. Say hello, Robinson.
Hello, Robinson.
Chaz could not make it, and I will forever call him a bitch for not being on the show tonight. But he is forgiven. We're back 2 weeks in a row. Can you believe it?
Oh my God.
I know, and you're still in Vietnam. How's Vietnam?
Vietnam is very hot, very sticky,
Sticky.
and very nice. Very wonderful.
It's starting to get very warm here in Phoenix as well. It's a little bit scary that you get so quickly acclimated to the weather when you live somewhere. I've been living here now almost 10 years. Can you believe that I've been living here almost 10 years?
That's when you bought the house 10 years ago?
No, I bought the house in 2009, but
Okay.
I was living in Scottsdale before that, but I've been in Arizona since 2006, and it will be 10 years in 1 month.
That's
10
a good
years.
That's good.
That's a good long time.
I think it's safe to say that you're home.
I would agree. I am definitely home. So, Chaz cannot be with us this evening because apparently he has an engagement in the morning that has him waking up early. And here's the part that I'm going to give him a lot of shit about, because I texted both of you that I was going to be a little late to the party tonight. And that was because I decided to take my children to go see the new Jungle Book movie. And we were originally going to go at 8 o'clock, and we got there, and I didn't think it would be particularly crowded for the Jungle Book, but it was. And the theater was like 90% full. And we said, you know what? We really don't want to be in a 90% full theater. So we decided to go to the 9 o'clock show and said, you know what? Robinson's in Vietnam. It's the middle of the day. He won't mind waiting an hour. So I texted Chaz and I said, hey, Chaz, it's me. We're going to bump the show an hour, and then we'll just do a 1 hour show instead of a 2 hour show. And he said, well, I'm really tired and I have to wake up early and I'm not going to be able to stay up that late. And I said, no. Maybe you misunderstood. We're going to do a 1 hour show from 11 to midnight instead of a 2 hour show from 10 to midnight. It won't make any difference. And he said, well, I really got to wake up early. So I said, hold on. Were you planning to not be on the show as it was? Because it's 8:30 and you hadn't told me that yet. Well, you know, I got to wake up pretty early and I'm pretty tired. And I said, all right, well then, fuck you. We'll do the show without you. And that was how we ended the conversation. Then he wrote me back a sleepy emoji with Z's going across it.
Hey man, we don't need no stinking therapist.
Exactly. So,
And you know what a therapist is?
do I know what a rapist is?
The if you just separate it, it's the rapist.
Mm-hmm.
So Chaz is the rapist of the show.
You know, and that's so fitting. And the beauty of this is he will not listen to this podcast. I guarantee he will never listen to this. But maybe someday in the future he'll go back and listen to some episodes and be like, hey, what the fuck, guys? Like, that's not cool. Maybe. So I honestly do not know how the audio is going to sound for this episode, because we got some new gear this week that we didn't have last week. Last week we kind of went with a hodgepodge of old and new gear, and this week we have new and new gear, but still struggling to figure out exactly the right way to do this. And I'm trying to avoid the double pass through that I was doing before, where I was getting that really obnoxious echo. And I think we've succeeded. My only concern is that there seems to be this random pop that happens, like a click every once in a while. And I don't know if it's just in my headphones or if it's something that will be recorded. So to the listener, if there is an occasional click that you hear, I apologize in advance, and we'll try to get that sorted out by next week. I may have to return this fancy new input device that I bought and get a different one, because that really is the only new thing. I would be really disappointed if it turned out to be the computer that was causing this. I would have to return that, I guess.
Well, maybe after the show you can RTMF.
What does that mean?
RTFM, sorry. My dyslexia.
What does that mean? Read the fucking manual? Yeah. There wasn't a manual. It's plug and play. You plug the son of a bitch in, you plug your microphone into the front, and then it records. But we do such a strange setup here that it's not as easy as it sounds. You'd think that recording a Hangout or a Skype call would be pretty straightforward. The only complexity that we add is the bumper music that comes off of my phone. That's the only additional input that I really need. And so I had to spend all this money on a device that has two inputs instead of a device that would have been half the price to have one input, but it's nice because if I ever have an in-studio guest, I can have a secondary input. But I don't know.
You can also use it for taking calls.
That too, but I have the old mixer that I could always pump into that secondary input and have 12 inputs. So it's all good.
Okay, very good.
Anyway, so I saw The Jungle Book, and as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, I don't know, when was the Disney animated Jungle Book made? I think it was made way before my time.
60s. I think that was made in the 60s.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think they must have like re-released it or something when I was a kid because it became very popular at one point in the 80s or 90s. And I loved
that. Disney takes films completely off the market. You can't buy it, you can't view it, you can't see it at all, and they wait 10 years and then they release it again and it becomes a big hit for a whole new generation.
And that must be what happened, because I loved that movie and I still love that movie, and I want my kids to love it too. And what was cool about this movie was it was the Jungle Book story, slightly different, but basically, you know, Shere Khan, the tiger, wants to get rid of the man cub and kick him out of the jungle because he's growing up and he's going to be a threat to the jungle. But this new one is kind of dark and aggressive, and he kills spoiler alert, he kills the father wolf, and Mowgli kind of, you know, goes nuts when he finds out. And they've got all the animals, but obviously this is live action, it's not animated, and these animals, I don't know if they were like a mix of live action animals and CGI, or if it was all CGI, but it looked really good. And they did a great job with sort of a newer, darker, edgier story. And they were even able to add some of the popular songs from the animated movie that everybody loves, but in a much more subtle way, where it wasn't so much like a musical as it was just the song that Baloo sings, you know, the Bare Necessities song. Like it's just a song he sort of sings to himself that Mowgli hears him singing. And then the song that King Louie, the big orangutan, sings is the voice of King Louie is Christopher Walken. And so it was great. Yeah, it was absolutely great. And then the snake, which has a very, very small role in this film, the snake's voice was Scarlett Johansson. And so even as a snake, she was fucking hot and sexy, and made me want to get it on with the snake. So it was a good film. I recommend it. I give it like 4 out of 5 stars. Very good, very good movie. Good for the family, or good for grown-ups. It's definitely not just a kid's film.
Not just okay, it's not just a children's show.
No, not at all. Not just a children's film. Good film all around. Really big actors. Bill Murray plays Baloo. So that was a fun. He played it in a really fun-loving sort of way. And then Ben Kingsley does the voice of Bagheera, the Black Panther. So very A-list celebrities doing the voices. So I enjoyed it, and it was worth starting the show a little bit late tonight to get to take the kids out to a movie. That doesn't happen all the time. So I hope they enjoyed it as well. We got a large popcorn that lets you get a free refill now at the movie theater. And I tell you right now, I love Harkins movie theaters because they do this: buy a loyalty cup at the beginning of the year, and then for the whole year, whenever you go to a movie, if you bring the cup with you, it's like a plastic 32-ounce cup, you can get it filled up for $1. And so it makes the movie-going experience a much less expensive endeavor as well, since the tickets are $12 a piece.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. Anyway.
I never really liked having to pay $5 for a nickel's worth of popcorn.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I can't watch a film without popcorn.
No. And you can't watch a movie without a nail file either. I learned. Yeah, he's a nail biter, ladies and gentlemen.
That's the alternative to the popcorn. If I don't have something to do with my hands, then I will bite my fingernails, no matter what kind of film it is.
I've known this about you for many, many years, and Robinson always has lovely nails. because he sits there watching movies with a nail file or a piece of sandpaper and keeps the nails filed. You know how exciting the movie is by how quickly you hear the nails being filed. If it's a boring part, is kind of like, and when it gets to an exciting part that's full of action, it's like, so it's pretty funny. I always tell when Robinson's excited at a movie. Anyway, I've got a clean. So Rachel and I share this space, this studio slash office, and I cleaned my whole side of the office and got everything organized, and I've got covers over the jerky machines now, so that I've got jerky marinating actually right now that I need to rack up tonight. But then you can still sort of see her area over here.
That little pigsty over there. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not going to touch her stuff because I don't know what's important. Maybe she has a system, but mine is now very clean and very neat and very nice. I don't know. I just got a bug up my ass. Got off work a few hours early and decided I was going to come home and clean up.
I like the poster on top of the refrigerator.
Yeah, it's a neat. We Jackson, my youngest son, is going through a phase where he is like big into monuments, any sort of national monument or a landmark, Big Ben or the Statue of Liberty, or Notre Dame's Cathedral. He loves that shit. The Eiffel Tower up in the corner that you can't see. And so we found this big piece of art, and it's a bunch of pictures of things that he loves. And so we're using it as a bribe that if he can go a week at school without getting in trouble with his teacher, where they have like a system where they move their name from slot 1 to slot 2 and slot 3, and slot 1 means you didn't get in trouble, slot 2 means you had to be kind of told twice to stop doing something or reminded to do something. Slot 3 is like you struck out, now you actually got a note sent home and you got in trouble. And he tends to move his card down to slot 2 on the regular, because he can be a bit of a pain in the ass. So we're using it as a bribe. It will go up in his room. He will get it when he can go a week without moving his name down to slot number 2. And it's been here for a few months. So he's struggling with this goal right now. But if anybody knew me when I was his age, I was quite the handful, and that I never actually grew out of that. So hopefully this doesn't stay in my office for the rest of forever, because if he's anything like me, it may very well find a permanent home in this office. And I hung my sign. Check it out. Right up there.
Quail Run Avenue.
I got that sign. I won it in a raffle at my kid's school. The name of their school is Quail Run Elementary, and it's like a full-on metal street sign. And I won it in a raffle, so I hung it up. And then over in that corner is all of the state quarters, all the quarters that have the states on the back. So you could get a board, and it has all 50 states, and you could try to collect all the states, and we collected all the states. So we have the board.
I think I had one of those when I was a kid.
Did they have them when you were a kid?
Yes. Coin collecting has been around forever.
Well, this is the specific quarters that have the states on the back, which I think started in the early 2000s.
But I think the collection I had was pennies by date.
Ah. I found a really old penny the other day from 1938.
Wow.
And then I found a dime from like 1940 something, and it was silver.
The 38 was a wheatback, an original wheatback, yes?
Yes, absolutely. And I had a silver dime.
I had a penny, I think it was 1942 or 43, and it was made of steel.
Really?
Because there was a war going on, and copper needed to be used for making ammunition.
Yes.
So instead of making pennies out of copper that year, they made them out of steel.
And now
And
they
that's
make them out of zinc,
yes.
and now they cost 2.5 cents to make.
I remember about 10 years ago, nickels cost a quarter to make. No, that was about 20 years ago. I don't even know anymore.
It's crazy. They want to get rid of the penny because the penny costs more to make than it's worth, and they've gotten rid of pennies in many other countries because they just round down. So if you're a merchant and somebody, it works out to $3.53, they round it down to the nearest nickel, so it would be $3.50. If it's $3.56, then they round it down to $3.55, and it's a wash in the end, but it can actually benefit the economy. And but I guess the US is just, we love our fucking pennies. You ever notice on a penny, so if you look at a coin in your pocket, all the silver coins, whether it's a quarter or a dime, all the silver pennies, the president is facing left.
Yes.
So whether it's Roosevelt or Washington or whomever's on the nickel, Jefferson, they all face left. And those are all the silver coins. But the brown coin, who happens to also be the president who freed the slaves, gets the brown coin, is facing right. So I've always looked at it as sort of an affront to Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves, who were brown people, like the penny. And he's facing in the opposite direction as all of these founding father types who had fucking slaves. And I don't know. Maybe it's just a conspiracy theorist in me, but I think that's kind of bullshit.
There's a reason for everything.
I'm sure there is. It's the Illuminati. So, this is the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. We always like to start the show out with a whole bunch of nonsense and then hopefully get into a conversation about something that's a little more relevant. But I'm still flying high from last week's little interesting factoid that there were 36,000 people talking about the Sober Happy Hour. And some might think that was an anomaly. Some may say that it was a glitch in the Facebook matrix. But I say, damn that. I say it was absolutely true because I want to believe that. So I do. And I don't care what anybody else says. So given that we have so many new listeners, I wanted to start a series that we already started with Sabina a couple of weeks ago. And that series is going to be a new segment on the Sober Happy Hour called Drugs. And when we have an episode in the drugs series, we will take that episode and we will discuss one type of drug. Maybe we'll do an episode on alcohol. Maybe we'll do an episode on crack or cocaine in general. Or we did our episode on meth. That was the inaugural drugs episode. I thought tonight would be a great night since it's just the two of us, and I'm pretty certain Chaz's perspective on this would be limited because Chaz was not a big drug user, definitely not a drug abuser, and doesn't have a lot of experience with different drugs. So I thought tonight would be a good night for the two of us to talk about one drug in the segment called drugs, and maybe we can come up with a cool animation on the screen and a neat little song to play. But tonight I wanted to talk about all the derivatives of opium. Opioids, heroin, prescription painkillers, opium itself.
Muscle relaxers.
Do those fall into the same category?
I believe so. I believe that there is an extraction from opium that is used specifically for relaxing muscles, because that's one of the things that, I mean, when you do opium, you're experiencing all of the opioids in your body at once, and the pharmaceutical industry is extracting and breaking those down and being able to use just different parts of opioids for different effects.
Well, it's really interesting to me that I would say out of almost all the drugs, every drug has its sort of stereotypical way of being thought about. You think about people think about crack cocaine, they think about crackheads, they think about maybe, ghetto urban people, the black community, and crackheads walking around, scratching themselves and asking to borrow $1 to buy some crack. Think about meth users and you think about toothless hillbillies and these stereotypes, right? And whether or not they're accurate, which they are not very accurate, obviously those stereotypes exist for a reason. But I've met some pretty functional crackheads, and I've met some pretty unassuming meth heads, and heroin specifically, and the derivatives of, is kind of a unique thing, right? Back in the 90s, there was this whole thing in the modeling industry known as heroin chic. These sunken faced, very thin, pale female models that looked sickly, referred to as heroin chic. And you look at somebody like Philip Seymour Hoffman, who was a longtime heroin addict who died of a heroin overdose. And he was not a sunken-faced, pale-looking dude who was, skinny, skin and bones. He was a portly man, a wealthy man, a very famous Oscar-winning actor who had heroin had him by the balls. And
who is this?
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Oh, okay.
And what's interesting about that is when you know people who are opioid abusers, and you yourself maybe were, they're really easy to spot. And it's not because of how they act or what they do. There's a look. There is a physical look that it can change a long time heroin junkie. Their face changes. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. The skin, the color of their skin becomes more pale.
Even just the shape of the face seems to change.
I've told you this once before when I first met you, but I crossed paths with a famous rock star, and I didn't even realize that it was a rock star when I crossed paths with him, because I was so taken back by how pale and gray his skin was. I just thought I was walking past a dead man. And that was Keith Richards in Munich. And I never talked to him or anything, but we just passed on the stairs going up to the VIP room. He was coming down.
Interesting.
It wasn't until I got to the top of the stairs that it hit me that, oh shit, that's Keith Richards, and then he was gone. But yeah, and also the dark circles that develop under the eyes and the sunken in cheeks, and like muscle mass and tissue loss.
It's very interesting, and you look at somebody like I use this person as an example of a heroin user because he had the quintessential heroin face, and I'm talking about Elliott Smith, and incredible singer-songwriter, a guy who just, man, had the shit kicked out of him by his drug addiction time and time again. But he definitely had the heroin face. And if you look at pictures of him, you even look at like the media pictures of him, the professional pictures of him that would be, even on the album cover of his last album that he made and released while he was still alive called Figure Eight. And he looks like a heroin junkie. And if anybody wants to know the kind of face that I'm talking about and referring to tonight, go find the album cover of Figure Eight by Elliott Smith. Just do a Google search for it. And that's the face I'm talking about. And it is a very distinct looking face. Anyway, so heroin specifically derived from opium, comes in a couple different forms. On the West Coast and in the Southwest, you tend to find what's referred to as black tar heroin. It is not what you think it is. You think of black tar, you think of, the La Brea tar pits, right? You think of like a dark black drippy gooey substance, when in reality it is more brown, and it is definitely sticky, but it's not like gooey. You're going to see that type of heroin sold on the street, usually by the $10 or $20 hit. And most often you're going to see it sold in the tiniest of little water balloons, where they will wrap the heroin up in plastic like cellophane, and then that will be inserted into the balloon in a very specific way, and the balloon will be wrapped back in on itself to turn into this little colorful ball. And that little colorful ball that is inside of a balloon will be what you buy. You're normally going to buy it in $10 or $20 increments. And most people that are familiar with this, they're going to unwrap their balloon. They're going to take their heroin out. And because of the heroin trade, especially on the West Coast, that's where my experience mostly is. So I don't know a lot about the East Coast, what's referred to as, China white heroin, where it's actually like a white kind of chalky powdery substance. It's still
processed, yeah.
It's still kind of clumpy, but it's definitely not like gooey, almost waxy like the brown or black tar stuff that I have seen. Some people will tell you that the East Coast China White is far superior to the West Coast Mexican brown heroin. I wouldn't know. I have no idea. But there's also a new and becoming very popular form of heroin, and the name escapes me, but it's becoming really, really popular amongst youth, the youth of the United States. The American youth is coming across this type of heroin that is really potent, and for whatever reason, really fucking cheap too. And I'm going to be honest with you, heroin is not an expensive drug. You could kill yourself if you don't have a tolerance built up. You can kill yourself off of $10 worth of heroin if it's the first or fifth time that you've tried it. And if you were to take that whole dose all at once, you probably wouldn't wake up. I want to remember what this new heroin.
And then there's people who have their $100 a day habits because they've
right, which is insane.
That's what they need just to not get high, but just to stay not sick, as they call
right.
it. So,
God damn it! I just read about it, and it just popped up, and then it disappeared. So the tar heroin and the brown heroin, according to this website, are slightly different. But I don't know. I've never seen a difference personally.
well, I'm not exactly sure, but I think the brown tar heroin is actually cooked with sugar.
No way.
Yeah, it's caramelized with sugar. They add sugar to it and they put it in a pan and they caramelize it until it becomes all that gooey caramelized mess. That's just what I've heard, but I don't know. I've never seen that process. But are you talking about fentanyl? No.
No, and I'm gonna do a search for it right now.
While you're
Yes.
searching for that, I'll
Yeah.
tell you a story. A friend of mine, uh, Zach, had he got a hold of a couple of patches of fentanyl. So fentanyl, if you don't know, is it comes in a patch and it's very small doses, like 12 milligrams that is released. It's actually 120 milligrams, but it's released in like 12 milligrams per hour, and you wear the patch for 10 hours and then you change it. And he tried a patch and he kind of got a little bit of a buzz, but he decided on the second patch he wanted it to be more intense. So he cut the patch open and squeezed all the goo out and ate it all at once. And
Yep.
he OD'd. He was unconscious for 3 days. Everyone thought that he was out of town when he was in his room, shitting and pissing himself while he was unconscious. And he managed to survive. And I don't know if he learned anything from it, but I didn't talk to him much after that.
There've been I've heard of a lot of cases of that, to be honest with you. I've even heard of somebody chewing up a fentanyl patch to try and dispose of evidence and ending up dead. Um, yeah, which is just sad. I don't know. Why can't I it's blowing my mind why I can't find what they're calling this.
Did you check your history?
No, it was a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember. I don't remember how long ago it was. It was months ago. But anyway, there was a new nickname, if you will, for a heroin that's being altered somehow, and it may be that it was being uh, mixed together with fentanyl, because fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, and typically the heroin that you're going to get is an opium derivative, which technically speaking is naturally occurring, which is the same as morphine is a synthetic form of heroin. So when you're going to the doctor and let's say you're having surgery and they're pumping you full of morphine, I mean, you're essentially getting the same shit, just in a much cleaner, form, and it's being injected directly into your bloodstream. And there used to be that in the hospitals, they would let you self-medicate when you were in a lot of pain, and you'd have a little button, little plunger, little button you could push, and I gave myself some nice heroin or morphine. And now it's definitely more controlled, where you may still get a button, but that button will only work once every 6 hours, so that you won't accidentally kill yourself. But I find it really interesting that people put heroin in this really negative light. Heroin is considered by most, especially like white young Americans, consider heroin the worst of the drugs, because it'll kill you the first time you use it. You're addicted after the first try, and it is the devil. And most people will literally look at you like you are some sort of heathen if you ever accidentally share with them that you have tried heroin. And I've learned this the hard way, and I'm guilty. I was the same way when I was younger, like in my early 20s, late teens. The idea of heroin was this really frightening, dramatic thing, and I tend to have a very different opinion of it now, because I see young kids experimenting with really strong prescription drugs that are just as dangerous as heroin, and they do it with impunity. They do it thinking that it's totally normal, that they're gonna, hey, my parents have a Percocet prescription in the bathroom, and we're gonna chew a couple of those pills up and get really high. But offer them some heroin and it's, oh no, we can't do that. That's awful. That's the devil. That's crazy shit. No one would ever do that. It's the same fucking thing.
Heroin is also associated with injection.
Yes.
Whereas Percocet can also be injected just as easily.
Absolutely.
You can cook it up in a spoon with some water and slam it, but you generally don't. However, heroin can also be eaten, or you can stick it up your butthole, and you don't get the same instant, slam high that you get from injecting it. But, or you can mix it with some water and snort it in a spray bottle. There's lots of ways to do anything.
There is
even cocaine. You can mix cocaine with saline solution, put it up your nose.
Yep.
Nobody knows you're doing coke because it looks like you have nasal spray,
And I would say, do you have headphones, Robinson, that you can put in?
Have the what?
Do you have headphones that you can put in? Because I'm getting an echo. I would say that the scary part is that you have kids that think that the prescription painkillers are harmless, but that the heroin is the devil because they're ignorant and maybe don't know, number one, they're the same goddamn thing. And number two, you don't only use heroin via intravenous injection, because I've never shot up heroin.
Neither have I.
No, thank you. I mean,
my brother was addicted to heroin for, I think, 5 years, and he never injected it. Of course, 2 weeks after he started injecting it, he died.
Yeah.
Because of a clot or something, not because of the actual drug, but something mixed, something got into the needle that, I don't know. I don't know all the details about that, but.
And that's the scary part. That's the scary part, because heroin on its own is not inherently dangerous. It's dangerous in large quantities, right? It can cause respiratory distress. You essentially suffocate. You stop breathing. That's how you die when you overdose on heroin. It's not as dramatic as it looks on television. You most often you kind of go to sleep. You stop breathing, so you start choking, but you're so out of it you don't even realize, and you don't wake up. And I've told people this before, and I stand by my opinion that if I had to choose, I am, what do you call it? What is the type of cancer? Stage 4. I'm stage 4 cancer. I am months away from death, now weeks away, now days away from death. Just find me a Mexican drug dealer, because I am going out in a blaze of heroin glory. That I would much rather that, which is essentially how my grandmother died. I look at
what the hospital's going to do for you.
Right. My grandmother, and I'm very glad that I was not a drug addict at the time, because sitting next to my dying grandmother, hospice, in bed, at home, with a big ass vial of liquid morphine in its most potent and strongest solution, which apparently when the hospice people came to pick up her body, that was like the first thing they wanted back. We need the liquid morphine back. We need to account for it. We need to take it. It is not to be left behind. But I mean, we were literally just like with a little droplet, little eyedropper, just fucking her up, man. I could only imagine how high that woman was when she died, because that essentially the cancer had spread to everywhere in her body. It started out stomach cancer. She was old. There wasn't much they could do. And she was skin and bones by the end. And I remember very vividly, because I think I was only like 18 or 19 years old at the time, but she my aunt, bless her heart, who was taking care of my grandmother in this condition, was told by the hospice nurse that if she starts to react or seems like she's in pain or whatever, to, you know, just fill her up with some liquid morphine. And she would just violently shake her head like, no, 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 stop giving me this shit. Right. I don't want to be sedated like this. Looking back on it now, that was probably what she was trying to convey was, I'm unhappy with the way that this is making me feel. I am completely out of it whenever you give me a dose of this shit. But yeah, man, just kill me that way, because you literally just get high as a kite, you nod off, and you don't wake up. That's it. Good night. It's over. But somebody who's injecting heroin, people always wonder, well, what's up with the lighter and the spoon and the cotton ball? Well, why does a heroin user's kit contain a spoon, some sort of fire starting mechanism, a cotton ball, and a syringe? Well, the heroin that you get from the street has probably been handled by a dozen people or more. It's been rolled up into these little measured out balls by hand, probably by a dirty ass hand. It's been, we use the word stepped on in the drug business. In a lot of cases, stepped on means cut. It's been cut with shit, additives to make it, you know, make 1 kilo become, you know, 1.3 kilos so that you make more money. But heroin could literally have been stepped on, you know, by a dog shit covered shoe. You wouldn't know. It's nasty. It looks dirty. It is dirty. And so by cooking it and boiling it, you're killing a lot of bacteria and impurities and things like that. And then by putting that liquid mixture that you've just boiled with your lighter on the spoon, so you have your spoon, your heroin goes in the spoon, your lighter goes under the spoon, it comes to a boil. That should sanitize that liquid for the most part. Dirty Heroin, great band name, by the way. Dirty Heroin is where people end up with the abscess wounds from injection sites. They're reusing needles, or they're sharing needles, or they have dirty heroin that hasn't been, you know, processed properly, or they're not cleaning the injection site before they inject. There's lots of reasons, but dirty drugs is a big reason. So then they put the cotton ball into the cooked liquid, which soaks up the liquid, and then you pull the syringe plunger back to extract the liquid heroin now from the cotton ball into the syringe. And the reason for that is just extra filtration at that point. The cotton ball is going to catch any of the little dirt and debris and shit that didn't get cooked away by the boiling process. I thought long and hard when I was thinking about doing these episodes on specific drugs, about whether or not it would be appropriate to discuss in detail how the drug is used and what it looks like and how it works. Would that be inappropriate? Would it be, you know, are we giving away, you know, recipes to people to go do bad things? And I came to the conclusion that if there are any listeners who have been on the fence about trying a drug for the first time, or in a certain way for the first time, that we might actually be doing a disservice by not explaining the safest and most appropriate way to use a drug, by shying away from that, by not talking about it. So if you are offended in any way, or you think that this is, we're taking this too far, I do want to say that the people who are listening that are going to be using these drugs, or are considering using these drugs, it is in their best interest to know the safest and best way to use these drugs, because they're going to do it anyway. And if nobody tells them how to do it properly, they could end up dead, or they could end up sick. They could end up in bad shape. So I don't know. That's the conclusion that I came to. Maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, we're not giving away, bomb making recipes or something like that. So you pull back the plunger, you have your essentially cleaned out heroin, and then you find yourself an injection site. You don't want to inject it into an artery. You would inject it into a vein, but do keep in mind this. You can probably only inject into a vein a few times until that vein decides to shrivel up and disappear, and now that vein isn't really available anymore. And it can take years, if ever, for a vein in your body to regenerate to the way that it was before you started poking at it. When my son was in the hospital recently, he had to get an IV put in. So they first tried to put the IV in his hand, and it came out. He's 7. Came out of his hand. So then they had to put it in his wrist. Then they had to put it in his arm. Then they had to put it in his other hand. And they had to do IV on him like 4 times. But they couldn't put it in the same one because that one had now kind of said, "Nope, I don't like this. I'm going to go hide." And the same thing can happen when you're shooting intravenous drugs. And eventually, over a long period of time, long-time heroin or IV drug users get really clever with finding viable veins to shoot their drugs into. I have seen the craziest shit between the toes, in the neck, in the chest.
Were you with me on my brother's bus when the girl came on? I don't remember.
No.
I was visiting my brother, and we were just sitting on he had like a bus that had been converted into an RV, and a girl came over to visit. Really cute, nice, looking very normal and healthy and pretty and lots of makeup and everything. She came on the bus, and she was sitting down and just chit-chatting away about it. And she opens a kit, and she starts mixing up her heroin like every day, just like she's lighting a cigarette. She pulls out her little compact mirror and starts tapping her neck. And just like, okay, there we go. And just like,
crazy.
What the fuck? Okay,
that is crazy shit.
Yeah.
Because
she'd used up all of the veins in her legs and toes and fingers and arms. She just used them all up. Now she's going to her neck. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And I have heard stories. I have not myself seen this, but I have heard stories of people that have used up all the veins, including the veins in their neck, that they've gone to the veins in their head. And then from the head, they've lost the veins in the fucking head as well. And they're shooting into the tongue, but they've lost the veins in the tongue as well. And there was this crazy motherfucker who has now managed to find a way to shoot his heroin into his taint, right in there. Because apparently there are veins in the taint. That's commitment, motherfuckers. Because who does that?
So, I remember God, I think I was in my early 20s. I came across this encyclopedia, and I always love to just like thumb through encyclopedias and read random things. And I saw this picture of 10 men dressed in colonial style, like 1800s wardrobe, sitting around a table, all of them with a tourniquet and a needle, and they were basically developing the process of making morphine out of opium. And this, I mean, it was just like a couple of paragraphs. It was like all of these men were They spent a year testing all this stuff every day, and they all ended up dying of heroin overdose.
Of course.
Yeah, just completely addicted. That was like became their whole life. All they wanted to
Yep.
do was, let's see if we can make it better. It's like trying to make the best weed. People are just crazy about it. But
Or make the
um,
best anything. And
but
you
yeah,
but the thing about it is, if you're trying to make the best chicken liver pate, eventually you're going to get sick of eating chicken liver pate, and you've given it out to all your friends and they're like, no more, I'm
yeah,
good, thanks,
yeah.
I've put on 15 pounds in the last 2 weeks, and they're just going to say no thanks. But if you're giving all of these test subjects heroin every day, and now all of a sudden you're trying to make better and better and better heroin, you've got customers lining up. They're not going to push you away and say, no, I've had my fair share this week, I'm good. No, they're lining up now 3, 4, 10 times a day. And the saddest part about it is your tolerance builds up, and it builds up fast when you're an opioid abuser, where all of a sudden the amount that you were taking in a day becomes the amount that you're taking 3 times a day, or the amount that you were taking in a week becomes what you take in a day.
Or
And
dose.
right, and it's crazy because I remember, and I count my lucky stars, because I never got to a point, I didn't like getting high to the point where I wasn't functional. And a lot of heroin users and opioid users, that's the goal. The goal is to just get lit up. You're completely fucked up for a couple of hours, and then it slowly starts to fade away, and then you need more. I never liked it. Scared me. I would get panicked if I ever took even just a little too much, to the point where I would feel like I didn't have control over my body, and the nodding off. Oh,
Yeah, I
right.
remember.
I didn't like that. And there was one time where I was experimenting with a new method, and it was a liquid solution for oral, or I'm sorry, nasal consumption, if you will. And we didn't really know how to dose it because of how we were doing it. And it was it was like an eyedropper almost. And it was like, okay, let's just dropper it and let it do its thing up the nostril. And I
Right.
remember, like,
Wait 20 minutes, see how you feel.
right. And it was more like after 2 minutes, and I was like, oh shit. All right. Uh, Nobody leave. Like, everybody stay close, because if I die, I need you to resuscitate me. And I didn't like that. That was never the point. And that's the hardest part about talking about my experiences years ago with using drugs, was trying to explain to a non-drug abuser the different levels of drug abuse, is really different. And it's hard to do, because there are some drug abusers that abuse the drugs because they just want to disconnect and escape, and be as fucked up as they possibly can be. And then there's other kinds of drug abusers who just like to get to a certain point and they're good. That was me.
Right.
I like to get to a certain point. I'd be good. I'd coast. I'd want to stay there. I want to pick up the guitar and write music, and had no interest in anything else in the world. And it was okay. And obviously it took more and more and more and more to get me there. And it became obviously all consuming, which is the part that gets bad. And that sucks, because you tend to not care about anything else. It's all you're thinking about. It literally is all you think about. Where am I going to get my next fix? And if you start to run low, or God forbid you run out, then it's panic mode, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you don't live in a big city where you can walk out your front door and find a drug dealer. Then you're stocking up, you're spending a retarded amount of money and trying to make sure that you never get to a point where you're running out. And because in the San Francisco area, it's really easy to get like full-blown heroin. When you don't live in that area and it's much harder to find that kind of drug, you're now supplementing with prescription painkillers, which tend to be mostly acetaminophen based. So you're dealing with, Percocet that's like 30 milligrams of the actual, oxycodone, and then, however many milligrams,
300 to 500 milligrams of acetaminophen, which affects your liver.
And then your liver's your livers and kidneys getting all fucked up, right? So then it just starts causing all kinds of problems, and then you can't get as much, so then you start drinking, and it's just bad news. But there's more. So we talked about heroin as being, the devil drug when you talk about young people thinking about drugs and thinking about drugs as being bad, which they are. Don't abuse drugs. It's just not. It's not a good thing to do. You don't only shoot up heroin. That's the crazy part, is that there are millions of people who have used heroin who have never injected it into their veins. You can smoke heroin, snort heroin. Robinson mentioned you could literally stick heroin up your ass.
Which is called popping, by the way.
Popping.
Or shooting.
All right.
Yeah.
And there are people who do this with you take like an OxyContin pill, and OxyContin it's not Oxycontin. A lot of people think that it is OxyContin, like a cotton ball. It is not. It is Contin, but say it fast and it sounds like Oxycontin, whatever. It is incredibly powerful drug, like insanely powerful drug. They give these pills to cancer patients for pain, and an 80 milligram oxy is like the strongest painkiller you can get with a prescription.
Well, I believe fentanyl is actually stronger.
You're absolutely right, but fentanyl is exclusively for people that are literally dying of cancer, terminal cancer patients. But they might prescribe, 80 milligram oxys to a person who's not dying, who's in tremendous pain for whatever reason. But they became really easy to get on the street. And these 80 milligram pills will run you, anywhere from $35 to $45. Maybe now they're more like $50. But that one pill, because it's a slow release pill, that'll keep you high as a kite for hours and hours and hours. And there was a point in my drug career that I was crushing those motherfuckers up and snorting an entire one up my nose multiple times a day. And it was to the point where that amount, I'm a small person. I am 5'6" tall. I weigh 130 pounds. So to be ingesting, 160 milligrams of oxy in a session is just bananas. And to do that multiple times a day is just crazy. And what's even crazier about it is that if you're hanging out with other drug people, it's almost a badge of honor, right? Where you get praised for having this high tolerance, being like, fuck yeah, man, you're the man, right? You're a badass because you can chew up an 80 milligram. But then you start to realize, like, well, shit, digesting it, that's stupid. That's wasting a whole lot of it, because most of it just goes and doesn't even make it to the bloodstream. So then you start snorting it. Then is when you start making that scary, off ramp into injection land, where you start thinking, well, maybe I'm going to freebase it for a while, right? Smoke it off of some tinfoil. And then the only next step is intravenous drug use, mixing drugs. I mean, if you think of the number of celebrities that most people have heard of who died mixing heroin and cocaine, and it is incredible the number of people that are well-known celebrity types who have died from what's known as a speedball. And a speedball is heroin or like and cocaine. So somebody will inject both heroin and cocaine into their veins at the same time, which I never fully understood, because to me it seems like, they would contradict each other, but I guess that's a thing and people dig it, and for whatever reason, and it kills people, because as far as I'm aware, I never mixed those two drugs together, at least not in any great proportions. But I will never forget the very first time that I ever tried, and I know this is a show about opioids, but the very first time that I ever tried cocaine was because I had had too much to drink and I had to get home. And I was going to have a very angry girlfriend if I didn't get home in a reasonable amount of time. And I had had way too much to drink. But an idea was posed to me that if I tried a little bit of this cocaine, that I wouldn't be drunk anymore. And I said, bullshit. Come on, that's ridiculous. That doesn't even make any sense. Try it. Okay. And voila. I wasn't drunk anymore. Or at least I didn't think I was. I didn't feel drunk. I wasn't spinning. I felt sober. That's crazy. So, as far as I know from the research that I've done, the reason that speedballs are so dangerous is because it has a similar effect on the opioid high feeling as well. And
Pleasure receptors.
right. So if you are taking a dose of heroin and a dose of cocaine, the cocaine sort of overrides the lingering effects of the heroin. So all of a sudden you're taking more and then more and then more, and your body and your brain aren't feeling the effects of it as strongly as you normally would because of the cocaine. Then you've taken too much, and now you're in respiratory distress, and now you're in trouble, and you just stop breathing.
And this is not anything new. This has been around and been used since 3,400 BC. Opium. Opium has been used as a painkiller.
Yep. And you had your Chinese opium dens.
I sent you a link, or not a link, but a little citation that I found. The first prescription, the earliest prescription that has ever been found was in 2100 BC on a Sumerian clay tablet, a prescription written.
Shut up.
On a clay tablet in 2100 BC.
That's crazy.
Opium. I sent it to you in the chat. Yeah, for pain.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So
clay tablets. So nothing new.
Yeah.
This is not like, a new thing. It's just since the Opium Wars in the 1800s and the Silk Road, that's when it really became
well, and we have
area.
We have a society of pill pushing doctors and a society of hypochondriacs, a whole generation of now 2 or even 3 generation of hypochondriacs who want drugs for every ounce of pain that they feel, and doctors who are happy to prescribe it away like it's nothing. And the reality is that teenagers who are abusing these prescription painkillers, they're not buying them off the street. They're not spending their milk money on Percocet and Vicodin. They're finding this shit in their parents' medicine cabinets. And the sad part is that it doesn't take long for it to turn into a habit. The truth that you try heroin once and now you're hooked is been disproven time and time again. But if you are using Vicodin or Percocet or whatever you can find on a weekly basis on the weekend with your friends, it is pretty amazing how quickly your brain and your body, when you wake up Monday morning after a pill bender and it's the third weekend in a row, nothing sounds better than finding another one of those pills to take that Monday morning when you wake up and you
Hair of the
feel like
dog.
you got hit by a bus.
Yeah.
And then you're off to the races because
So the
you
word heroin comes, or the word morphine, I should say, comes from the Greek god of dreams, Morpheus.
ooh,
Yeah,
you take the red pill or the blue pill.
exactly.
And if you're a junkie, you take both pills.
That's a speedball, right?
Exactly. So, what are some of the I like to talk about what are some of the like slang terms for these drugs, but also I wanted to talk about what are some of the prescription drugs that have essentially the same effects as heroin, opium.
Methadone, fentanyl, propoxyphene, uh,
Hydrocodone,
hydrocodone. Um,
oxycodone.
there's levofeno, uh, MS cotton. There's mm, meperidine.
There's
There's who
there and then
knows?
there's some name brands. There's
Percocet,
there's Vicodin,
yeah,
Percocet,
Vicodin, Norco.
Norco, um, Roxyset. Um, there's an interesting one, and I found this one out the hard way. um, very often, people think that they may be able to drive down south, cross the border, especially in the state that I live in, the state that you live in, if you live in the southern part of the state, where you can cross over the border into Mexico and you can approach a Mexican pharmacist and say, hey, I'd really like to buy some pain medicine, some painkillers. And because they're pharmacists, they may, they're not going to immediately assume that you're some junkie looking for pills, but they know what you look like. And if you look like a little old lady trying to find some pain medicine to help with her, aching joints and her arthritis, they might be more willing to help you out. But there is a drug, and typically from Mexico, it comes in a uh, aluminum blister pack, yes, and it is called Percodan. And Percodan is not Percocet, and it is essentially bullshit. It will not. It is designed to be a pain medicine, but really not any more so than Tylenol or Advil. It is not going to get you high, and it will fuck up your kidneys and your liver, especially when you take one and realize it did nothing. So then you take 10 more. You could kill yourself, but it wouldn't be from an opioid overdose. It would be because your kidney stopped working because you just took a fistful of Percodan, and Percodan doesn't do shit. I don't even know that it's in the same scheduling as Percocet. So that's an interesting thing too. So if you ever walk into a pharmacy and you see on a poster in the pharmacy that says all controlled substances are behind a time locked safe, there have obviously in the last 30, 40 years, the crime rate at pharmacies has gone up and up and up and up and up and up. Violent crime. People busting into pharmacies armed, and the only reason they're not there to rob them for money. They're there to rob them for prescription painkillers. 99 times out of 100, they're not going in there looking for Viagra, or they're not looking for insulin. They're not going to rob the place for their friend that has AIDS and needing HIV medication. They're going in there looking for prescription pain medicine, period. That is what they do. And a friend of mine, and I may have told this story before, but I'll tell a brief version of it right now. A friend of mine who has never been into drugs, not really even into drinking, had a brother. And that brother, unbeknownst to him, was a hardcore pill junkie and was taking a lot of pills and was not in a good place, and had found out that it was really easy to go into pharmacies, threaten them, and get prescription pain medication to feed his habit. And this friend of mine had no idea that this was happening until one day the SWAT team showed up at his house because he was living with this brother. SWAT team shows up at his house, holding him at gunpoint, seizing all of his computer equipment and everything in his house that could any way be related to the buying and selling of drugs. He got put in handcuffs. He got taken downtown. The brother wasn't there at the time. They ended up finding the brother, and it turned out that his own brother had been on the criminal end of at least a dozen pharmacy robberies in their area that they lived in Southern California over the course of that like half year, and had gone in with a weapon of some kind. And this friend of mine is sort of a gun enthusiast, and over the when he turned 18, first thing he did was buy a firearm. And then when he turned 21, because in the state of California, you can buy a shotgun when you're 18, but you can't buy a handgun until you're 21. And had a small arsenal of firearms that were legally owned in his home. They were all confiscated. His $3,000 Macintosh computer that he used for audio and video production, confiscated. And some of this stuff was never given back because he was living with a drug addict who had been robbing pharmacies for pain medication. It's crazy shit.
Yeah.
So all of those prescription drug names, just be aware. It's not something to fuck around with. My whole problem with opioid abuse started with Vicodin. That's where it started. It started with taking Vicodin, then taking more, and then having
a prescription.
Yep. And then taking more and more and more and more until the Vicodin didn't cut it anymore. And it switched over to Percocet, which is stronger. Hydrocodone, not as strong as oxycodone. And then it switched over to OxyContin. And then it switched over to heroin. And then I couldn't get that anymore. So then it switched back to whatever I could find. And it started with a very small 5 milligram Vicodin habit that ballooned out of control. And it happened over the course of just a few months' time. And the result was near catastrophic end to everything in my life that meant something to me. But to this day, there are people that don't understand and who've never taken the time to try to understand There are people in my life, in my family, who believe that this was a choice that was made. I made a choice to become addicted to drugs and alcohol. And that still hurts to this day. That hurts my feelings. Because the reality is, yes, I made a choice to start incorrectly dosing myself with prescription pain medication. But the funny part was that I made a realization before I moved away from San Francisco that I needed to cut this shit out because I was going to be moving back to California and I didn't know anybody there that I could get drugs from anyway. So it was time to stop. So I stopped. No big deal. It sucked. Don't get me wrong. It was terrible, but I did it. And I went almost a year without touching the shit. Then I dabbled a little bit after that, but never got seriously back into it until one fateful night when I injured myself. I ended up with tendon damage. I had 5 stitches on the inside of my arm to put my tendon back together and 25 stitches on the outside, and I still have no feeling right here in my arm. But that night in the emergency room, the nurse gave me a big fat injection of morphine right into the butt cheek. Intramuscular morphine. Oh, that's awful. It hurt so bad. For weeks after it hurt. But that was it, man. That big fat dose of morphine at the doctor's office or at in the emergency room, that was it. That's all it took. My brain went crazy and said, "Yes! I've been waiting and I've got it and I'm not going to let it go." And off it went. Hell in a handbasket.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. And the saddest part, Robinson, is that I think about young people, really young people. This little girl that Rachel helped put on a fundraiser for because she was dying of neuroblastoma, a really aggressive cancer. Put on a fundraiser for this little girl because she was dying of cancer. She was in the hospital for months. And that whole time she was in the hospital, she was on a steady IV drip of morphine for the pain that she was in. And I fear for this little girl's future because I'll tell you right now, your brain, I don't give a shit if you're only 3 years old. Your brain doesn't forget that. Those opiate receptors are forever changed. And if at some point when she turns 22 years old or she's 15 years old and has her wisdom teeth taken out, some doctor somewhere, sometime is going to prescribe her opioid pain medication. And that could be the beginning of a really nasty love-hate relationship with those kinds of drugs.
Yeah. You know, speaking of children, in the 1700s, when Frederick Sertuner, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but he was a German doctor, German scientist. When he was developing more, he started testing it on dogs, and the dogs kept dying. He couldn't ask them how they felt. So he decided it would be safer to test it on children.
Oh, man.
Everybody thought, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, of course. Why not? Fucking
kids.
Germans. What's the matter with Germans?
Well, that was, a couple hundred years ago when children weren't really considered people yet.
That's true.
Property.
I mean, and it has been shown time and time again. Testing on lab rats and lab mice that you give them morphine or heroin or any derivative thereof, and they will choose, and you give them a choice between food, water, or the drug. Every time they will choose the drug over food and water, and they will choose it until they die from it.
Yes, that's a very famous study that was done. It actually started with nicotine.
Yeah.
They were off nicotine, and they would take the nicotine, and they exchanged the water.
Your internet has decided to
that was
kick the bucket. Are you there?
Yeah.
It got really and we weren't hearing you.
Okay.
So that's I think that's our cue, Robinson. It is now it's after 1 o'clock in the morning here, and I have to work in the morning. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna start this motherfucking bumper music, and we're gonna say goodnight.
All right.
So, hey, I think we did a good job, just the two of us.
I think so too.
Well,
we don't need Chaz.
No, fuck Chaz, right? So you've been listening to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast, and we will be back next week, and we should have Chaz back next week. I'm pretty sure he'll be back next week, as long as he's not feeling too sleepy. But you can send us an email, soberhappyhour@gmail.com. You can visit us on facebook.com/soberhappyhour. Follow us on Twitter @soberhappyhour. And that's pretty much it. There's nowhere else that you can get in touch with us. But if you are going to subscribe on iTunes, we would love you very much for that. But leave a rating. We would love a rating, a comment, a review. You can comment on this YouTube post when it shows up. You
Hit
can
the
also
subscribe button down here, and also below that, send a link to Facebook, to your Facebook. Send a link of this show, or just like us on Facebook, so that people that you know that you like it, and it'll help us in the long run. It'd be really nice. Thank you.
Thank you, because I always forget to mention the subscribe button and the like button. So from now on, you're the button guy.
We have a lot of subscribers on the RSS and YouTube, iTunes.
Yes.
But YouTube, we need more subscribers on YouTube. So hit that like button. That will help us.
Subscribe to it. We will be forever grateful.
It's right down over here. Just go straight down here. You'll see where it says show more. It'll open it up. There you go.
There you go. And this episode, same as last week's episode, was brought to you by an independent distributor of It Works Global. My wife, I love her to death. Visit her website, rayrapsyou.myitworks.com, if you want to order something. It's more than just beauty stuff or weight loss stuff. It's all kinds of stuff. Go there. I'll post it in the show notes just like I did last week. But we will be back next week with the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you even more for subscribing and liking and whatever you're doing. And if you or yours is considering getting sober, I highly recommend it. We're done. Good night.
Good night.